Okay, and welcome to this week's StudioLive event. It's all about hyper-personalisation. I'm Gideon Hyde. I'm one of the co-founders of Studio Space. I'm delighted to be your host this morning. Hyper-personalisation is a hot topic, as we all know. It combines marketing analytics. It's particularly exciting. It allows businesses to often get in front of the consumer, create very empowering and empathetic moments. And according to Deloitte's recent survey, it can boost your ROI by as much as 80% and increase your sales by as much as 10%. And who doesn't want that? So a particularly pertinent topic. So gone are the days of one size fits all approaches. Consumers today demand tailored experiences, as we know, which really resonate with their individual needs and preferences. It's all about personalizing the customer experience. So what do we mean by hyper-personalization? It really involves using advanced technologies and data analytics to tailor content and experiences to individuals based on their unique interests, preferences, behaviors, and demographics. It goes beyond simply addressing someone by name or recommending products based on their past purchases. It's all about crafting a bespoke experience for each and every user. So over the past couple of months, we've seen a huge amount of interest in this topic, particularly amongst Studio Space clients. It's certainly a hot topic that everyone lists and are looking to take their customers to the next level on. So today we'll be exploring this topic and why it's causing such a buzz, and looking at practical examples about how you can make the most of hyper-personalization opportunities as a big brand. And to do this, we'll be delving into expertise, and we've got our four amazing panelists and agencies who all sit on the Studio Space platform, and they'll be sharing real-world insights with you. By the end of the session, you should be able to walk away with a tangible set of ideas and actions you can take back to your organization to harness the opportunity of hyper-personalization. So a bit of housekeeping. If you've got questions, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. Please write your questions in our chat or the Q&A when you think of them, and we'll come back to them later on in the session. And I know some of you will be more familiar with this topic than others. And I'd like to say that there's no such thing as a stupid question. All questions are welcome and invited. So without any further ado, we're going to kick off with some introductions. And first up, I'd like to start with Andrew Smith from Planaria Black. Andrew, please, a brief intro.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Yes, Andrew Smith here from one of the founders of Planaria Black. We are a business accelerator. And we bring what we call planarian behaviors into your business to make you essentially stay one step ahead. Planaria are a microorganism that constantly regenerate. And one of the things that we see in the world today is the need to constantly regenerate your products, your services, your experiences for your customers, so that you do stay one step ahead. So our business model is all around improving relevancy, which is why we're here today, improving effectiveness of everything from your communications on one side all the way through to the product and service ecosystem, and therefore, at the result of that, improving your revenue, which is the black in our name. So that's a short potted history of Planaria Black.
Andrew, thanks so much. We'd like to move across now to Ines from 8 and 4.
Hello, everyone. I'm the social director at 8 and 4. We are a social, digital, and content production agency fueled by tech and talent. We work with a variety of verticals, and our approach is very much audience first and performance led. In my role, I look after strategy and digital solutions for our clients, and I oversee the quality and the development of our social and digital offering, all the way from insights through to content marketing and in-channel delivery. I have been at 8 and 4 for 8 years, but I've had multiple roles in marketing and communications, ranging from social management all the way through to coordinating UX specialists in executing digital strategies.
Ines, thank you so much. Sarah from Imagination, please.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm from Imagination. We're a global creative agency known for our innovative approach to brand experiences and comms, I'd say. So we blend creativity with technology to craft engaging and transformative experiences that connect brands to their audiences. So that's me.
Thank you, Sarah. And last
Sure.
but not least, Jeff, please, from Built Visible.
Morning, everyone. My name's Jeff. I'm the CEO of Built Visible. We're founded on 15 years of search expertise, and our kind of modus operandi is kind of working to reduce brands' ineffective online spends and CPAs by delivering successful customer journeys. And our kind of pedigree of doing that is in data, SEO, and digital content strategy. So in this world, it's very much about content strategy and how that fuels hyper-personalization and tailoring those experiences to customers.
Wonderful. Fantastic range of expertise and experiences to share. We'd like to kick off the session by looking at the kind of opportunity and benefits afforded by hyper-personalization. So I'm going to turn to Sarah first. If you could give us a kind of a quick primer on what we mean by hyper-personalization in your opinion in an omni-channel world, what does that look like? Just to get us all on the same page as we're chatting this morning. Thank you.
Sure. And anyone else, feel free to build on this. This is just my take on it. But hyper-personalization for us, or for me and my work, is taking brand experiences that are, I guess, going beyond traditional personalization techniques that use maybe more real-time data and analytics to deliver more relevant and engaging experiences for consumers. So some of the brand examples that are in mind when I think of the word hyper-personalization, I think of like Stitch Fix in the United States. They were in the UK. I think they had to close shop during COVID, but it's like this online styling service that you put a ton of personal information into, and it personalizes all kinds of clothing selections to your individual taste, budget, lifestyle, all kinds of things. So another one that comes to mind, of course, that I think everyone is more familiar with is Netflix. I don't think I need to elaborate on how they're using data and personalizing recommendations to what each individual viewer wants to see. So that's probably my take on hyper-personalization.
Oh, super. Thank you, Sarah. So Jeff, we've seen lots of interest in the market from large organizations who want to get more out of personalized experience with their brand. What do you think is driving this excitement? And what opportunity areas do you think are out there that you could help them with?
I think what's driving it as ever is consumers. So, like consumers have very high expectations, and that kind of increasing on brands at the moment. So, brands are now expected to be this, like an entertainment hub, a portal, like the brand as publisher's idea, all of that kind of stuff is, they're having to work a lot harder to capture customer attention. And I think that's the thing. That's where the opportunity is for brands is, this is kind of now becoming demanded by customers. If you're not kind of doing this, you're quite far behind. So they're calling out examples of people that we know do it really well. It's like, well, that's the opportunity. It's like, that's the thing they're known for. And I think it's really interesting, like across, well, obviously we have like an acquisition brief typically with clients that then flows through to retention rather than like a digital product experience, I guess. But yeah, it's a hard thing to get your head around to do it. And so where we come at this is like the content strategy side to make sure that, we're covering those customer journeys in their entirety. I think that's one of the barriers we'll probably come on to later, but that's a big piece of work. It's a lot to get your head around, but if customers are demanding it, brands have to move with it, right? That's the way it typically works.
Yeah. So we're seeing really the customer now is really
I'd build on that by saying, sorry, Gideon. I'd build on that one as well by saying that actually, in addition to the consumers demanding it, we have seen a business wake up, I think, haven't we? Where businesses are actually recognizing that they can deliver actually genuinely what they want to deliver, which is a service that customers want and need, and that will help them drive that pipeline. It will help them drive the growth of their business. So there is a recognition, I think, as well amongst senior board level executives that actually it is the future of the business. We've done a lot of work in the financial services space, for example, and I think here you're seeing that actually, particularly in that omni-channel world of offline to online, how do you move the audience from one to the other is actually a really good understanding of that, what we call the mindset of that audience. What is stopping them? What is the barrier to starting a new journey? So before you even get into the digital components, the tech that can drive that personalization, it's really understanding the audience and what they need from that particular product. And maybe we'll come back and touch on that later. But I think the organizations are also driving it as well now.
Yeah, it's a good shout. And so the boardroom, looking at the tech, seeing what the art of the possible now is. We've got the consumer demand as they are consuming these new experiences, and it's becoming a bit of a new normal. So I'll bring Ines in. Ines, do you agree with those viewpoints? Do you have anything to build? Any other things, any other dynamics in the market that you're experiencing or seeing?
Yes, absolutely. I think the reality is that, as we're saying, the modern landscape is very complex. Customer journeys can be long, can be short. There's a crazy amount of touch points, and the consumer is actually sort of like expecting that personalized experience more and more, to get to those outcomes quite quickly. What I think it's done to us is, as an agency, we've always been audience first, but so we've done things like building audience personas, everything that, as marketeers, everyone here has done. But what it's done is it's placed a stronger focus on understanding the audience and how they behave, what they like, but in a very synchronic way. So how they're feeling now, what they're looking for now, what they want to see now, how they engage, and all of this starts to paint the picture. So it, in a way, removes the focus on the silos and makes you think about campaigns as something, very integrated, very holistic, and sort of like a lot more broader. But I think ultimately it comes down to making customers feel special. And it's almost like you're walking into your coffee shop and they remember what you want to have, on Monday mornings, because that's your usual. That's very much what we want to replicate at this stage. And this is what we're sort of like trying to do with our strategies. It's not something that feels self-interested for us as marketeers, but it's something that's actually adding real value to the consumer. So it's almost like a flip in terms of how we think about our strategies.
That's a great point, actually. And making customers feel special, I think, businesses in essence are quite simple concepts that you have to kind of make customers feel special enough to buy your products or services. And if you could deliver them and, at a cost less than you're spending on them, you make money. And I think the whole point about making customers feel special is really, really kind of at the core of hyper-personalisation, as you're saying. And I'll just pick up on the other point you mentioned, because I think it's really interesting, is that it kind of asks the organization to rewire itself again, I guess, or to a deeper level around the customers, or shows an organization how they could do that. So maybe we'll pick up on that point later on, and how organizations get to grips with it, the actual organizational design, I guess, of how they can get to grips with hyper-personalization. So I'd like to move us on, because we can obviously pontificate about hyper-personalization, and Lord knows I do pontificate a bit. But I'd like to move us on into a kind of real-world examples and actual case studies to bring it all to life. And I know you all have lots of those at your fingertips. So if it would be possible to share one or two of those, and we can explore them a bit on the call. So I'll start with so Jeff, looking at your hyper-personalization experience and maybe a case study, and what the kind of learnings were you could extract from this case study, or indeed others. So
yeah, I think so one that springs to mind, I think, is working with a financial services organization, particularly within life insurance. So as Ines was alluding to there, where you've got like a long purchase funnel, complex products, there's a lot to unpack there. It's not going to be a repeat purchase, but you've got to get them at the right time. There's so much going on there in terms of, how do you understand when someone's in a position to buy that product? They've got lots of options. There's lots of ways to buy that. There's lots of nuance to it. It's deeply complex. You could do it a number of different ways. And I think our approach to that is just really understanding user behavior. So we come from this kind of organic search background. And if you think about the way Google works, is it's essentially demand driven, right? So if people are telling it what they want, so they're inputting personalization. So the way we tend to approach this with content strategies, we flip it around and we say, well, actually, what can we learn by how people are behaving? And then overlay that with other types of data, other types of data that can then inform how we build comprehensive, full channel, full funnel content strategies. And really getting to grips with how people are going through that journey was kind of the easy bit, if you like. Actually, the hard bit is some of the stuff we just touched upon in terms of in a sector like that, you've got regulation, you've got compliance, you've you've got brand teams, you've got performance marketing teams, all of this stuff. We're trying to build something that sits at the middle of all of that. And I think in a sector like that, where it's more complex, that's where additional challenges come into play. However, when it works, it's fantastic in terms of, you know, the return on that. If you're able to serve customized experiences, join that customer journey up from a measurement standpoint across all the channels, yeah, we can see serious uplift when that happens.
Before we move on, can I just check on your point about what we can learn from how people are behaving? I thought that was a very interesting comment, that you can actually see this as a bit of a two-way strategy, maybe, about how you use customer behaviors to actually help your strategy.
Yeah, so at the core of hyper-personalisation, we've got to understand what an audience is trying to do, what they're trying to achieve. There's two parts to this. There's one from a performance standpoint of, okay, we've got to drive them to achieve something. And then there's sort of the emotional storytelling element of brand. We kind of sit in the middle of those two areas. So we've got to bring to life brand, emotional storytelling, okay, why this particular brand for this particular thing. On the performance side, because we come from an SEO background, essentially sort of from 15 years ago, we really understand how people search, and people often think of SEO as search behavior, but we look at it as human behavior, because it's demand based. They are putting that information into the largest AI platform in the planet. And if you're able to understand that data and pull that back out again, then it can really form the heart of understanding how customers search. And that's not everything. It's kind of, but it's our starting point in terms of how we approach it. And it's incredibly effective, because what you can then obviously do is build organic strategies specifically, which means you reduce your reliance on paid. But equally, just from a pure content conversion standpoint, you're really catering to your audience and maximizing ROI on people that do land on site.
Thanks, Jeff. That's very, very helpful, very insightful. Ines, from your point of view, is there a hero campaign or a case study that you feel captures the essence of hyper-personalisation and what you were previously saying?
For top of my mind, I would say probably the most suitable example is a project that we did with one of our travel and hospitality clients, and this was for a very relevant part of their business, their loyalty program, where you have, different audience segments, different consumer segments that are at different stages in their loyalty journey. They sort of like belong to different tiers, and therefore they have different levels of awareness of the brand and the offering, and what they can get off the back of their interaction with the program, and different content needs, right? So we basically worked with them to develop an integrated strategy. The initial brief was social focused, but naturally we sort of like took that brief and we said it cannot just be social focused. It has to be something that is holistic and integrated with what's happening on the website, what's happening on the app, on email marketing, etc., for it to be actually something functional, because the interactions that the consumers are going to have naturally with the program and with the marketing and comms for this part of the brand is going to be quite complex, right? So that's how we built all of that content strategy, and we did it in a very nuanced way, where we actually had all of our different segments, and we had bespoke content strategies based on their needs and also their natural channel interactions and triggers. So on top of this, we knew that they had a bunch of data that they weren't using effectively in an integrated way. So that's where we worked with our internal CRM and UX teams to ensure that everything became a lot more centralized, through DMPs and CRM systems. But also we started implementing different ways to gather first-party data and zero-party data in a fun digital way. So implementing things like gamified social, incentivized campaigns, sort of like trying to push that value exchange to the forefront of everything that we were doing, just so that then we could better personalize content off the back of it and contextualize it better. And then naturally, all of it became, a very successful sort of like cog machine that was delivering really, really good results for them.
Yeah. Ines, what sectors were you looking at when you're looking at these case studies? Any particular sectors?
So this was specifically for a loyalty program for travel and hospitality. However, we've done this for a variety of clients. So we've worked within the automotive space, in very integrated customer journeys, fast-moving goods, shopping.
So multi-sectors.
Yes, it's multi-sector. Yes.
Yeah. So we'll turn. I'm going to turn to Sarah actually now, because I know, Sarah, you've got quite a lot of experience in the retail sector and amongst others, I imagine. If you'd like to kind of share your kind of hero topics or hero case studies, some of the learnings that you've had with some of the client experiences, that'd be most welcome.
Sure. So imagining most of our work is creating experiences in life and in real time. So I think a good example of that is some work we did with Visa called Masters of Movement. It was supposed to be around this theme of like the seamless movement of money across the world. So we created this like big LED football pitch and did games of 5-a-side at this event for Visa. So everyone had their own motion sensor, and it tracked your movements throughout the game. And the end result was like this fusion of football, art, and technology, I suppose. But you basically created your own piece of art based off how you played your game. And then to take it a step further, we like crafted those pieces of art into like unique and individual NFTs back when NFTs were a thing that we were exploring. And
they'll be back.
You could take it home with you. So that was a pretty cool piece of work, which was like hyper-personalization in real time based off how you play a game of 5-a-side. So yeah.
Do you think it's important, Sarah, therefore you start your hyper-personalization journey as a brand with a big idea? Do you think you need a big idea? Because at some level it could be we're just going to put in the technology to make hyper-personalization possible.
Yeah.
We've heard a bit about, you need to aggregate your data. You need to kind of make sure your channels speak to each other. You've got to have your kind of touch points linked up, et cetera, et cetera. Equally, do you think it's important that you've got a big idea which that kind of hooks into, which the end consumer actually relates to?
For sure. Gideon, you're talking to a strategy director. I hang my hat on big ideas. If we get to creative execution, I'm always asking, why does it make sense? What's the big idea? So for sure, I think it's really crucial. We can't go into like hyper execution phase based off of like, just execution on its own. It's got to make sense for the brand. So yeah, that's really important to me. And in this particular case with Visa, it was around the movement of money. So we came up with Masters of Movement. That was our big idea, and it was a part of their larger brand platform at the time. So yes, very invested in big ideas and making sure it makes cohesive sense for a brand and whatever we create.
Thank you. So from one strategic thinker to another, I'll bring Andrew in. Andrew, what's your view on how hyper-personalization becomes real from your kind of case study point of view? What's the kind of entry point? What are the kind of problem statements or opportunity statements it can help solve?
I thought I might build on some of Jeff's commentary from earlier, actually, and maybe just dive into to another FS example. We talk around, I mentioned earlier, mindset modeling. I think Jeff's got a really good approach there, but when we get into the product and service area, how are we complementary to that? Because there's no good following that intent that is essentially driven through those channels of existing audience behavior without really understanding about the mindset of that customer at the beginning. And I think a lot of the hyper-personalization does fall down at the moment because there's not a step taken back, maybe in that more generative research side, to understand really what are the motivations, what's someone's state of mind, what makes them feel comfortable, what's preventing them taking action, for example, and why, for example, might they be searching in a particular way, which might not be the right thing that they want to do, but they're struggling to do something with my particular product or service. So at the outset, we often help brands uncover either through their existing research, so plowing through lots of existing research, which tends to exist in large corporations, and putting that together to understand that specific behavior, maybe topping it up with a little bit of qualitative interviews to really understand what that person is thinking, what's their real world view, how to understand their perceptions of that particular product or service. So in FS, as an example, one of the things that we found that really aided hyper-personalization was basically thinking about it like a mirror. One of the things that was stopping people acting in the pension space was that lack of, there were a lot of barriers to product understanding, lots of jargon being used, lots of complication in the service design elements, how the product was communicated. It was stopping them doing things. So we look at a mindset model saying, are you in a phase where actually you are, basically sticking your head in the sand, you're ignoring things, you're basically a passive person? Or are you more of a proficient person in that space? Have you already got one pension, for example? Are you looking to bring them together into a pot with another one? Because that's a very different mindset and a very different behavior. So if you understand that and you've got all of the different bits of intent going on from understanding the behaviors, for example, through Google, you can bring them into a more tailored, personalized pathway for that specific onboarding journey, which then can help activate them and really, I think, engender the loyalty in the product. So then you're looking at specific cues like, do people respond and reflect to someone by seeing a 30-second, 45-second snip of someone saying, this was me in pensions, I didn't understand this, now I've done this and I understand this. And people can really resonate with it. And that resonating means that they're going to continue on that journey to that next step. And often that's the initial barrier that we find, that we can't get people into a journey where we can then tailor it accordingly through that whole service element. So that's one of the builds, I think, on some of the great work that Jeff talked about.
No, it's very, very interesting. You've kind of segued nicely, actually, into the next section, which is some of the challenges around hyper-personalization. So if you wanted to continue, Andrew, for a second, then we'll bring the others in. But when you're looking at hyper-personalization in organizations, there's a lot you typically would need to bring together to make it happen. There's a lot going on because of the way organizations haven't been built necessarily if they're 30 plus years old, which most of them are, to kind of around hyper-personalization. So there's a lot that needs to happen to make it real. What are some of the challenges, maybe from the data point of view, or the organizational design point of view, or indeed from the strategy point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could also bring in, look at it from a technology standpoint. We could start thinking and talking and probably rabbit hole in the world of AI, which perhaps we shouldn't do on this specific call. But I think I'd maybe look through the lens of a retail client that we've worked with. And when you think about retail, it's omni-channel, right? So therefore, you start out with a whole series of problems. You start out with, you've got your search behavior, then you go through and you think about, well, actually I've got online purchasing behavior, but then you've also got products and services that you might like to go into a store to actually see before you buy them, and those journeys do become hugely fragmented, and you have to be really careful not to try and push someone into the wrong pathway. So understanding at the outset of those journeys what their particular motivation is, how to take them on a journey where actually they might pause in digital and they might go into retail. So for example, thinking about DIY retailer that we work with, looking at the kitchen experience, for example, how do you bring into their home, for example, the ability to touch and see and feel what that kitchen might look like in their world. So, using technologies like Matterport to bring it in and really personalize the fact that they can change the colors of the door fronts, the style, the knobs, they can see how things pull in and pull out, and give them that own little personal experience that they can dive into within their own store. But then equally, from a genuine personalization point, when they go into store and they might go for a design appointment, now, where's that content? Does that content transfer between a customer-led system and an in-store system? Do those two pieces of technology connect, or are they completely disparate? In which case, you're not allowing someone to bring their thought process into a designer in store, or you're having to restart that conversation again. What do you like? Why do you like? What style? Those two systems should work seamlessly. So I think there's a lot of work that we've had to do behind the scenes with some clients in terms of thinking about the technology stack, the systems integration, and going through all of those elements. Yeah. That's probably my start point.
Ines, I can see you're nodding. Do you want to share your views on some of the challenges in terms of executing hyper-personalization strategies?
Yes, absolutely. So very much like Andrew, I was nodding along because I was agreeing with absolutely everything that you were saying. Like every marketeer, we have struggled massively with attribution challenges, and we have to be quite smart in how we track activity. So leaning on the platform's own conversion APIs, AI solutions like Vantage Plus and such, and also integrating with third-party tech platforms. So you've got things like Adobe Marketo, DMPs, and so on that can support you. But it's also working with our clients and their internal teams and their internal systems, sort of like, as I said, challenging them, working with them, consulting on what is the best approach to actually break the silos and connect things in a much more efficient way. So that's been a real big thing for us. I would say, as I mentioned before, the sunsetting of cookies and all of the challenges associated with it have meant that we need to be smarter as well in how we gather data at the moment. So how we can sort of like sort that first party data derived from interactions with the different platforms and the behaviors, as Andrew was saying, but also how we can sort of like lean more on the zero party data, data that is voluntarily shared by consumers based on that value exchange that I was referring to earlier. So that's been another one. But also, and I think Sarah mentioned this at the very beginning, sort of like finding that balance between giving something that is of value to the consumer and feels relevant to them, but also doesn't feel intrusive, has been something that we've had to navigate quite a bit, because hyper-personalization is almost something that you need to be quite balanced with, right? If you do too much of it, and if you sort of like go beyond that very fine line where people sort of like find it a little bit too relevant for them, it then sort of like fails to be effective. So that's been another interesting piece of the puzzle for us. But I would say the biggest and most complex challenge for us has been connecting the dots. So working, so for example, most of the briefs that we get tend to be siloed, within social or elsewhere, but we need to work with our clients just to ensure that we are sort of like thinking broader and thinking about that customer journey and how we can better integrate everything.
So there is a risk that you could become overly familiar with a customer, overly intrusive, too hyper in your personalization, maybe. Sarah, what's your view on the complexities?
I guess I have a few thoughts. I think it is striking a balance. I agree with what Andrew was saying earlier. I hate answering the same questions twice. If I've already done that part, it's very frustrating. I guess a really good example, and I hate using it as an example because I think we always do, but I just had a issue with my MacBook and I was in Argentina. So I've been traveling a lot the last few years, doing different stints abroad. And there are no Apple stores in Argentina. They don't operate there. So I had to wait till I was back in the US. The US said, well, this might be better resolved in the UK because we need to mail it off and because of my travel dates. So I was like, okay, let me just take it back to the UK with me. By the time I got to the UK, there was like this whole paper trail of like what I talked to, I talked to someone in Argentina about this issue and then I handed it off and the US gave me some advice. And so, yeah, I didn't have to repeat myself at all. It was all there. And then they fixed it. And it was like the error wasn't seamless, but the experience in resolving it was cross borders.
You make a really good point, actually, and I think the good point is that hyper-personalization is about making customers feel special at the end of the day, but feeling special can actually be about fixing problems in a really efficient fashion. It doesn't always need to be, it doesn't always need to be exciting.
Nice to not have to like tell three different markets that like what my issue was. That information traveled seamlessly.
So doing basic things really well. So in the interest of not asking the same questions again, actually, let's move. I want to kick us forward into the future. So let's move forwards into 5 years, and let's continue, Sarah. And then we'll move on to Jeff. But what do you see as the kind of some of the future of hyper-personalization? Where do you think this is going?
I see it moving into really interesting places. I guess a watch out. Like I see, how the Spotify Wrapped is like a hyper-personalized thing that we all enjoy every year. I guess maybe one thing I've seen that I'm hoping to see less of is brands doing that all over the place where it doesn't really matter. I don't know if there's anyone from Trainline on the call, but the fact that I
use it
5 Rangers last year and that they sent me my year in review for brands that I don't actually care about. I hope to see brands leveraging hyper-personalization in a way that makes sense and that isn't that adds value, and don't over hyper personalize if it doesn't make sense for your brand. I guess I would say
that seems to be a consistent theme about it has to align to normal customer behaviors. You can't just it can't overwhelm customers or be irrelevant. Let's move on to Jeff. Jeff, do you want to share a few views on future compliance?
I think in the last section, I think that all those points are absolutely bang on. So I'm glad you didn't come to me because I kind of ran out. But I think just to pick up on one of them that Ines was saying around just the way these siloed briefs and the way people buy, I think what's going to be really interesting is the more that this stuff can be done and evidenced and cases can be built and all that kind of stuff and played back into the ecosystem. I think brands that, again, adopt early on this kind of stuff will win very quickly. People will then follow. I think what'll be really interesting is how the buying behavior changes from brands to do this stuff. So instead of finding these siloed briefs, we should see more integrated briefs. And when we see more integrated briefs, we will see more successful outcomes with all of this stuff, because at the moment we're kind of reverse engineering it. So it sounds like you get a brief, you're like, right, we're going to answer the brief, but we've then got to tie it to everything else. And then you spend a lot of your time doing that kind of organizational change piece. So I think that will move on. And then I think, even today, a lot of us talked about one to many, in terms of the personalization, but that one-to-one hyper-personalization is still, nascent, it's still emerging, and it's on agencies, I think, to pull forward and make this stuff happen. I think the other thing that's interesting that we haven't touched upon too much is AI, and it's just like the bullshit buzzword, but I'll throw it in there. But I think there's a really interesting idea around that creepiness element, in terms of, there's no regulatory frameworks in place yet. That is coming down the line for sure. Responsible marketing with AI, I think that's going to be both an opportunity, but then a barrier thrown up at the same time. So that's just something to bear in mind and consider, because obviously AI will be hugely powerful in driving some of this behavioral stuff forward as well. Yeah. Just to pick up on your point about it starts with I guess you're kind of saying it starts with the right brief. Are you seeing the briefs using hyper-personalization as their start point, or at least putting it into the briefs? Are you seeing more of that coming your way? To a degree. Yeah, to a degree. I think what's more common at the moment, and maybe it's just the nature of what we do and the way that we sell, is that we're plugging it into other things where it's just got to be a no-brainer in terms of if you want to maximize the effectiveness of work that you're doing for a client. So yeah, we are seeing more come in that say, I want to achieve this. I think when you get into it, again, you enter that issue that Ines was talking about, in terms of you've got to kind of move upstream a little bit to re-engineer, okay, but how is this actually going to happen? Why is it that you want to do this? What are the component parts of the business? And from our, acquisition marketing typically, or retention marketing standpoint, what are the dots we need to join up front to make that happen in the first place before we even start, building a strategy? Yeah,
I think I can probably add a little bit to that from some of the work we've done in the last 12 or 18 months with a number of organizations. And I think maybe it doesn't start with hyper-personalization, to directly answer your question, Gideon, but actually what it starts with is we know we need to get closer to the customer. We know we need to create empathy. We know we need to create desire for the product. So when we're thinking about even the product and service design elements before the Marcom side, we've helped organizations reconfigure their senior leadership team. So bringing together technology, design, innovation, product teams, restructuring those teams, giving advice on how best you can actually get a real layer of simplicity through an organization. One of the sectors we worked in for that was education, and some really interesting insights in terms of how restructuring an organization can make you think right from the beginning of the product creation about audience first, and therefore you can then start to think about the go-to-market strategy in exactly the same way. So tailored learning pathways, there's a lot, your question was also about where's the future, what's going to happen in the next few years, right? But there's been a huge amount of success for, platforms and businesses like Duolingo, for example, in terms of learning and development. But one of the things we're seeing is customers sort of ask us, from an AI perspective, what are the correct inputs? How do we make sure that actually there's no bias in those products? How do we make sure that actually AI isn't taking over completely? And actually we talk around building responsible AI. We talk about human driven, not human in the loop, but actually human first, really, really important. So we've done a number of work streams where we've helped at that top level putting together governance and guidance policies for AI, and together they can actually link in with the other policies that an organization's got, but it does drive the behavior and start to knit people together to think about how to use some of the technologies more effectively. And then I think what you get is an outcome where essentially you are thinking customer first right from the outset, and you've also safeguarded the business as well. So we're seeing some businesses come to us at the moment to retrofit those sort of what we call responsible AI governance and guidance policies, because they're just not fed out to the organization, or if they are there, we're working on some sort of what I would call employee engagement to actually get the uptake with them, because just like any other form of communication, if you can put something out there, but it doesn't mean it's going to resonate with that audience, they're going to apply with it. So yeah, we're seeing quite a few things in that area.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. I'm going to move to some Q&A. Got a couple of questions. Let's start off with one question about how would an organization best kind of climb into hyper-personalisation? Would it be a Pathfinder project, or would it be something much bigger and programmatic? What's your kind of feeling on it in terms of what you've seen as being successful in terms of organisation picking up hyper-personalisation? I'm going to ask anybody. Anybody got a feel on it? Yeah, please, Jeff.
Yeah. It's a tricky one because there's massive. I think the big correct answer is that that's to make sure it's part of a programmatic systematic change program. That has to be the answer. However, the reality of life is that we have to prove value by doing things to begin with. Otherwise, I think the danger is the latency. So it's the lags. It's like by the time we get to board level of getting this signed off, right, we're going to go through this big impact change, it's almost all of that validatory work. The opportunity cost versus someone else has got going a bit quicker because they've either taken the gamble or they've done a pilot project, proved the value, and then worked and got outcomes. It's just pure opportunity cost. So it's a bit of a bullshit answer, but it's sort of both. But I think I imagine Andrew would probably agree with me. It's like the big correct answer is do it all absolutely properly. However, business cases have to be made. In our world, marketing budgets are being scrutinized more and more. You have to prove the value. So pilot projects are a great way for us to get in and do that with clients, both new and existing. So yeah, we see that as really effective.
And do you see? Right. Go, Andrew.
So I was going to say, you're completely right. And actually what I didn't say in that example with that particular client was they've obviously got a hot house team working on the initial product development, the AI implementation, and the governance that we give is to allow those teams to do that, because you can't take that away from an organization, but you just need to make sure that it is initially, for example, ring fence. So from an AI perspective, those guys are testing, trialing, they've got the authority to do it, and then they can bring, like you say, a use case to the board, which is actually demonstrating the value, and then you can get through to that sort of rollout phase. I think it's the natural support. Why would you change what has worked as a methodology for the last 10 or 15 years? That constant test, learn, iterate. You don't want to. You can't squash creativity, right? That's really, really important. But you just have to make sure that it happens in a way that, from a technology standpoint, we're not disadvantaging the consumer, particularly in this education space, right? Because there's so much you can do in education with hyper-personalisation, right? It's one of the biggest growing categories for, tailored learning pathways, right? Just think about it. It's all the way from, I mentioned Duolingo before, but down to kids and their kind of like, doodle learning and times table rock stars. There's elements of gamification here that Inez mentioned before. There's competition within class people. There's actually the fact that the technology obviously knows when you're getting things wrong, getting things right. It adapts, it learns, it moves. These are great uses of the technology, and what we hear a lot because of Gen AI in the last 12 months is a lot of scary stories, etc. But actually, they're in there. They're using it and they're doing it. And I think I'll answer one last question on your point about the future, because if we don't touch on the question of the future in AI and will it remove everyone's jobs? Then I still think we probably haven't answered the question about the future, which is it will remove some jobs, yeah. But only yesterday I had a conversation with an ex-colleague of mine about AI creating jobs. You know, I mean, the BBC has a staff of 80 to 100 odd people checking their AI stories for, you know, robustness, proof, reality. It's just going to create a new wave of jobs in a different.
No, I agree. I think AI, that you're absolutely spot on. It's impossible to have a conversation about the future, about the AI future in there at some level. I've got a couple more questions come in, which anyone can jump on. So I'll just throw them out there. But maybe Ines and Sarah, you can jump on the first one. How can brands create a personalized journey, both online and offline? Any views on that one? So maybe it's probably pertinent to something like retail, or any viewpoints?
I can touch on that, which I actually think connects with where this is all headed. I think, as Andrew and Jeff were saying earlier, hyper-personalisation is definitely going to become more pervasive across industries, and something that is going to do, which I referred to earlier, is it's going to remove those silos and better connect online and offline. If you think about everyone, we all carry this with us, you know, and we're being tracked constantly. All of the different sort of like platforms and apps that we actually interact with are tracking us and understanding how we are behaving, where we're headed, you know, what we're doing. Are we shopping in this place? Where we're paying? I think what we can anticipate is that everything is going to become more and more connected, as this is an unstoppable beast, you know, and we cannot fight the machine, as that famous band used to say, but we just have to work with it, you know. So I think what we can do as marketeers is just try to get prepared, you know, and actually think about what are the interesting things that we can explore at the moment. So, for example, we are actually doing quite a bit of this in events, you know, events marketing, sort of like in-store activations, you know, that sort of like space where we know that there's going to be a touch point on location that then we can connect with other activity happening in other spaces on digital. So these are sort of like things that we can use as a bit of a starting point. But yeah, as I said, this is only going to grow further. And I think ultimately it's going to become sort of like a very interesting space and a very interesting experience for the consumer, where you're going to have, you know, your experience in store, or, you know, on location at a hotel or wherever you are, informing the rest of your consumer journey, interacting with the brand. So I think it's a very, very interesting space for us at the moment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ines. Another question has just come in. Just to recap, what's the difference between personalization and hyper-personalization? So we had like a bit of a technical kind of definition, but how would you guys describe the big difference between those two things, personalization and hyper-personalization?
I think I would say that personalization is at a touch point level. Hyper-personalization is at a multi-touch point level, multi-channel level, as a very simplistic way of splitting those two. Thanks,
Andrew. Any other views on that one?
Yeah, I think for me it's that one. It's that one-to-one versus one-to-many is the split, is essentially what Andrew's saying. But yeah, another way of framing it again.
That's good. Any other viewpoints?
Probably being able to use data in real time in the moment, rather than legacy data to create something personalized.
Yeah. Okay.
There's that static versus non-static point, isn't there, which you make there, Sarah, which is good. So I go back to the DIY retailer that we worked with, and you know, having your app, having your experience, having that content that's relevant on your device is fine. But then when you go in store, do you go in store to the consumer part of the store, or do you go in store to the trade part of the store, right? And then instantly that needs to recognize who you are and what experience you want through that particular channel. So that's a kind of like digital to retail fixed example as well, where I think you've got to tailor it to the location as well, and you've got to pull all that information through, rather than just thinking about it, which would be personalization, which is just the one-to-one. You've got now this multi-channel dimension as an example.
Yeah, so that's a really good example of like bridging the online and offline together by, I guess you'd call them like unified customer profiles. And exactly what you described, you can update it in real time.
So is it fair to say that if one gets it right, obviously it's very contextual. It behaves within the context of your environment at the time. I think someone mentioned earlier that it learns behaviors. It's very much from the behavior back. So it's keeping up to date with learned behavior, i.e. it is a fine line between being too prosaic and then there's a too intrusive or too creepy. So there's a kind of a middle ground there. Any other examples of where you feel that it's been particularly well delivered, and you could kind of talk to that?
Did some work with a healthcare startup last year, and that was all around creating a sort of asynchronistic, the company's principle was creating an asynchronistic piece between clinicians and patients to improve outcomes of like drug treatments, for example, and how that level of being able to interact with a clinician as a patient to get the information you want, but not necessarily at exactly the time that they were available, so that asynchronistic point, still meant that actually we could create a tailored pathway for that individual where the clinician had information to the right type of content based on that person's very specific profile that was all linked through, and therefore they could put the right content back out to that individual to say, this is why you're taking this particular drug, this is the thing that you need to do, this is the way that you need to take it. Oh, you think you're seeing some side effects, okay, these side effects are particularly common, don't worry about these side effects, stay on the drug. If this happens at this point, then come back and let us know, but if not, these are the ones that you remember we told you there might be some of the side effects, stay on it. And it basically allowed you to get to that end of that, either a drug trial or a piece of medication which you took post-hospital, for example, to help the recuperation process deliver a much stronger outcome. And that's interesting because that's not necessarily at that initial point in time, but the hyper-personalisation element was the fact that the clinician had all of the patient's records in one place and therefore could pull the right level of content, and it obviously saved them a huge amount of time. So I think there's a lesson there that actually hyper-personalisation is about allowing you to tick the box which says, what do I want at that point in time? It doesn't have to be scary, it doesn't have to be over the top or creepy, but it's just delivering that right particular piece of content at the right time. It's responsive, essentially.
Yeah, I really love examples of personalization in healthcare, Andrew. So that's really lovely. And I see like Zoe has like swept London, if you've seen that example there. One of my good friends is showing me her like blood sugar in real time and really hyped about it. So yeah.
Hopefully not too hyped.
Like, watch me eat this cookie.
Okay, we've got time for possibly one or two more questions before we wrap up. So here's a couple more. Is there a way for brands to offer more personalized experiences, but without overhauling their data?
Well, we do some stuff like the Masters of Movement thing. We had no data. That was the data created in the moment that created essentially a souvenir that they could take home with them. So I think there are brand experiences that you can do, whether it's at events or sponsorships, or I don't know, we do a lot with like, at the World Cup or NBA finals and whatnot that create personalized moments or, personalized experiences from nothing in the moment. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sure.
I'd build on that by saying, again, some work we've done in telco, but some other work in FS as well. You don't need a huge amount of data to be responsive and encourage someone on a journey. So think about a savings journey, think about a pensions journey again, for example. You can create moments of delight, moments of surprise, elements of thank you to that audience, which are hugely personalized, that you don't need to basically go into an existing data set and do all your data mining. You can just do it based on touch points. So for example, knowing someone who is saving a pension and they're saving maybe £50 a month, right? Versus someone that's saving £500 a month. That's a very different typology of person, very different mindset. The first person, that first group, they want really, really regular little reminders to say, oh, you've topped up another £50. Well done. Oh, you've got to this goal of 500 this year. Oh, this year you've saved X. Someone who's putting in 500 quid is actually much, much more focused on the future, and they want information around, well, actually, your pot is going to be worth X. You put in, £6,000 this year. The pot has grown by Y. Other people conceptually can't get that. So I'd say if you're worried about data and organization, the first thing you can do is overhaul, the beginning of the process by really understanding the mindsets of that audience and what they're doing, what their barriers are before they enter. And number two, add a layer of communications and nudges throughout those journeys that basically elevate the engagement with it, and therefore basically the stronger connection and empathy that someone has with your product.
Okay, so I'm hearing a lot around, it can be done if you kind of look at the customer back, understand the engagement you want to create, understand the behaviors that you want to engage with. You can create great campaigns, ideas, propositions which use the principles of hyper-personalisation without necessarily having to reorganize all your back-end data. So that's probably music to the ears of some clients. Final question before we go there, I'm going to ask you after this question for everyone to kind of provide a little nugget about what everyone should take away in your opinion about hyper-personalisation. So have a think about that. Here's the kind of final kind of client question. Are there any brands who have got personalisation flat wrong? We heard about Trainline earlier. I think that's what prompted the question, that we can learn from someone else's mistakes. Anyone got a view on that one?
Maybe I'll just be provocative because you've asked that question and go back to Sarah's point where she was mentioning Spotify, because it is a great example, right? But equally, suddenly the recommendations you get in Spotify post-Christmas when the rest of the family have been on your Spotify account actually completely go out of sync with what you actually. And
so
suddenly
Spotify being a little bit.
Yeah, well, suddenly Taylor Swift is on my playlist, which is completely wrong, right? So there's little subtle elements there where they're not necessarily thinking about the time and the context of when those things are made versus your day to day. That's a little extra element that you.
So a bit heavy-handed, shall we say? Ines, what were you gonna mention?
Yeah, actually, I'll touch on Spotify first before I make the point I was going to make, because actually, I would say that I agree, but I would say Spotify are already taking steps in the different directions. So, for example, you used to have your Discover Weekly or Release Radar playlists that are sort of like tailored based on what you listen to. But actually, what I find really, really interesting is that now they've rolled out this daily playlists, which basically capture your mood in that moment. So, for example, on Thursday mornings when I commute into the office, I always listen to the same type of music to get me all pumped up, and Spotify knows it. So I think it's probably a way of addressing some of those concerns.
Right, guys, it's nuggets time, so we can do a quick nuggets. So we'll kick off with Jeff. A quick kind of takeaway from your point of view.
I pressure to go first. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say it because that's what we do. But my nugget would be just have a completely comprehensive content strategy that's going to fuel personalization. Because you can throw all the tech and the data and everything in the world, but if you're not going to emotionally connect with your audience and map it out with customer journeys from a content standpoint, it won't work in digital marketing.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? I'm going to pick Ines then. Ines, what's your nugget? What would you like someone to take away?
I would say remember to think about your audiences, but in a synchronic way. So how they behave in a specific moment, what they're looking for, what they want to see, and how you might start to get out of the silo little by little. Not rehauling the whole strategy, as we were saying, but sort of like getting there in stages.
Thank you, Ines. Sarah?
I would say, I guess, remember the core of what we're all trying to achieve, and not just using technology to see what you could do, but thoughtfully applying it where you should do. That would be my key takeaway, I think.
Thank you, Sarah. Strategically concise. I like that. Andrew?
I'm going to build on that, actually. I'm going to say, start thinking 6 months out, 12 months out, 18 months out. Think baby steps, small steps, work with what you've got, add on little extra layers that don't require that full data overhaul to start with, but build towards that and have a roadmap that you're working on to get to. So you're aiming to increase relevancy from day one, you're increasing effectiveness from day two, and then essentially what you'll see from day three is increased revenue. And that's the thought process that we follow to take someone on a journey. So actually you start seeing actions and results really, really quickly.
Andrew, thank you so much. We're at time. I want to thank all the panelists. Thank you so much to Sarah, Ines, Andrew, and Jeff. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've learned a ton. We've had a great sharing experience. It's all what Studio Space is about, bringing to the foreground you guys, your expertise, and sharing it with our clients. Fantastic. Just to kind of wrap up and say that there will be another StudioLive event and roundtable exclusively for clients, where we will be discussing the right talent model mix. So in an age of difficult recruitment and trying to do more with less, how do you balance full-time staff, contractors, and agencies? In the meantime, please do contact us if you'd like to chat about hyper-personalisation, or if there's anything else you're looking for support across your marketing spectrum, please reach out to the Studio Space team. We're here to help, and thank you so much.